Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Dr. Teresa Toscano, your resident speech therapist who specializes in infant feeding and lactation, but more importantly, I'm a future mom-to-be on a mission to provide free feeding therapy to other moms because good speech starts with good eating. Okay, so today we're going to discuss how an infant actually feeds. We're going to break it down into three key areas. We're first going to talk about the difference between an infant and adult anatomy. Then we'll discuss the reflexes the infant relies on during feeding. And then we'll actually talk about how the baby consumes milk. Understanding these aspects is important because as a parent, knowing what's normal helps you quickly identify when something isn't quite right, allowing you to address any concerns promptly. Remember, knowledge is power. So let's dive in. First, let's discuss the difference between infant and adult oral anatomy. So let's take a look at figure here. Image A on the left shows an infant anatomy, while image B on the right depicts the adult anatomy. Aside from the obvious size difference, I want to highlight three key features that distinguish the two. The first major difference is the jaw alignment. In image A, you'll notice that the lower jaw, or the mandible, is slightly receded. This is important because it allows the infant's tongue to move over the lower jaw and form a cup around the breast or bottle nipple. In contrast, image B, which shows the adult anatomy, it shows that the top and bottom jaws align, allowing the teeth to come together for chewing. The second difference is the size of the tongue. In infants, the tongue is relatively larger compared to the rest of the mouth. This is crucial because it allows the tongue to press against the roof of the mouth, which plays a vital role in shaping the upper jaw. As we grow, we want the upper palate to develop into a shallow dome shape versus a high, narrow arch. A way to think of this is that the tongue acts like your mouth's first braces. If the tongue cannot properly shape the palate due to, let's say, issues like a severe tongue tie, this can lead to long-term challenges with speech, eating, your dental alignment, and even your respiratory function. In contrast, by adulthood, image B again, the tongue has reached its proportionate size and compared to the mouth, and while it still fits the arch of the palate, the shaping is no longer affected by the tongue. The final key difference is the length of the neck and the position of the larynx, which we're going to call the voice box. In infants, the neck is much shorter and the larynx is positioned higher near the back of the throat or the base of the tongue. This area we call the pharynx, just so you know. This arrangement is crucial because it enables infants to eat and breathe simultaneously. As we grow into adulthood, the larynx descends, which is why adults need to pause breathing momentarily while swallowing to ensure food passes safely over the voice box and into the esophagus. Now, there's another feature I do want to talk about that is not represented in the figure, and that is the baby's suckle pads, which are found in their cheeks. Now, it's important to note that chunky cheeks do not equal suckle pads. Suckle pads are little balls of fat that are in the cheek, and their purpose is to keep the cheeks close to the gums. Now, unfortunately, there's been a trend where babies are not being born with fully developed suckle pads, and doctors aren't really sure why, but the street rumors are that because parents are opting for scheduled deliveries much more nowadays, suckle pads are not given the time to fully develop before the child is born. And as I mentioned, suckle pads, they're really important for feeding in that they are helpful with bringing the cheeks to the gums. And this plays a vital role in creating appropriate pressure when the child actually goes to eat. Now let's dive into reflexes. Reflexes are essentially sensory responses that help your child recognize food and consume it safely during these early stages of development. The first reflex I want to talk about is the rooting reflex. Now, this reflex is triggered when you gently touch the side of the baby's cheek or the lips, and it's seen as the baby turning towards that touch. This movement helps the baby locate the breast for nursing. It starts at birth and typically fades between 6 to 9 months of ages. But I will say babies that are bottle fed, this reflex disappears much sooner, as typically bottles are placed right into the baby's mouth and not to the side where they have to look for it. So if the reflex isn't used, then it disappears. The next reflex I want to talk about is the suckling reflex, which eventually develops into the adult-like skill of sucking. When a finger, a bottle nipple, or a breast is placed in the baby's mouth, their tongue moves in a wave-like front-to-back motion, and this action is actually used to extract milk from the breast or the bottle. The suckling reflex generally disappears around the 6 to 12 months of age, and again, it develops into the adult-like sucking volitional movement. Another important reflex is the swallowing reflex. Now, this occurs when saliva, liquid, or food ends up at the back of the baby's mouth, and the mechanisms of swallowing is triggered, and it transports those liquids or foods from the mouth into the stomach. While this reflex remains present into adulthood, obviously as adults we have more control over this reflex as we get older. Now there's two defensive or protective reflexes I want to talk about, and that's the biting reflex and the gag reflex. Now the biting reflex is triggered when a pressure is applied to the baby's gums, and the baby will move their jaw up and down like how we bite as adults. This is important because it prevents anything too large entering the mouth that's not supposed to enter the mouth. Now again, this reflex turns into a volitional movement, but the reflex fades around that 9 to 12 months of age. And finally, the last reflex I'm going to talk about is the gag reflex, which is activated when something touches the back portion of the baby's tongue. This may be seen as the baby opening their mouth wide, they pull their head back, their soft palate in their mouth raises, and they may move their neck or their diaphragm. This reflex is essential for protecting the baby from swallowing objects that are too large or unsafe, and as we all know as adults, this reflex continues into adulthood. So now how do the reflexes and the infant's oral structure work together to help them feed? Well, it's this beautiful, harmonious system that everything comes together. So let's dive in. First, everything starts with that rooting reflex. Again, we'll put bottle feeding on the side, but it starts with the rooting reflex, which helps the baby locate the nipple. Once located and the nipple stimulates the front lips, the suckle reflex activates, moving the tongue forward to collect the nipple into the mouth. Now remember, we have the infant's tongue that is proportionally larger than the rest of his mouth, which is important because it can press against the roof of the baby's mouth, so like the hard palate. And there is the lower jaw that is slightly back and not aligned, allowing the tongue to be able to glide over. And we have those suckle pads that are pressing against the gums. So as the baby collects the nipple into the mouth, it creates a seal around the nipple using their tongue and their lips. So with this seal, it has created a really cool pressure system between the breast or the bottle and the mouth. And as the tongue moves in this wave-like manner back and forth, it creates negative and positive pressure. And between those two seesaw systems, milk is extracted from the milk source. Then once the milk enters the mouth, it reaches the back of the mouth, it triggers the swallowing reflex, and then the food or liquid is sent from the mouth to the stomach to be digested. I'm going to try to attach a video to my video of an X-ray feeding session between an infant and its milk source. I believe it's a nipple, but it could be a bottle. And it's really cool because it just shows you how everything works more on the inside. Again, I think it's cool. Maybe you won't think it's cool, but as a speech therapist in me, I think it's very cool. And just so you can orient towards it, when you're watching it, it will be the baby on the left-hand side, the milk source on the right. You're going to see the jaw movement, you're going to see the tongue movement, and you're going to see this continuous white blob move from the mouth into the neck, and that's actually the milk. Now, if I can't attach it to my video, I will post it in the description. So as you see, how a child actually eats is not a extremely complex system, but it requires really important features that need to work accurately. And I say this because I meet a lot of moms that have difficulty breastfeeding, and a lot of times they think it's their fault, when really your baby just might need a little help here and there with these systems in order for you to successfully breastfeed, and that might be something personally you wish and hope for. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for spending your time with me learning about your child's anatomy, their reflexes, and how they actually eat. If you found any of this helpful, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. I've got a ton of exciting content for you coming up, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. All right, Dr. T signing off. See you soon.